The UK's purchases naturally start with 30 IPCs, but of course some of that will be dictated by if Germany was able to get rockets, if they rocket attacked them, if Germany strategic bombed them. We'll assume that the UK will start with their 30 IPCs, which they should in most games. And with those 30 IPCs, I recommend purchasing 2 industrial complexes or factories for India and South Africa. That may be controversial, but the map has changed sufficiently to make the purchases of factories in these more remote areas of the map a very viable strategy. So those purchases accomplished, you should go ahead and line up your combat moves. The easiest one to make is this destroyer attacking that transport. That prevents the Japanese from using that transport to attack India on their turn, and is a great use for that destroyer because there's not all that much else that you can do. The Jap fleet here is too difficult to attack, and running away with it, you will only get marginal benefit out of it. Over here, the submarine in Australia should come up and attack this submarine with the hopes of being able to deny it to the Japanese on their turn. And if other attacks may hinge on what the Germans are able to do, the German Air Force, as you can see, will likely survive in mass numbers. By being positioned here in Western Europe, this is so key for the Germans because it allows them to attack up into Sea Zone 3 should the British try to invade Finland, Norway. It of course defends Western Europe, and then it also defends Algeria. That's why it's so important for Germany to make sure that when they're going, that they end with as many planes in Western Europe as can possibly reach there. And my personal recommendation for the UK is that if Germany has 5 or fewer planes, then attacking into any of these territories is viable. But with Germany having as many planes as they have, and as well as this existing fleet, it becomes very difficult to justify any sort of Western allied UK invasion of Finland, Norway, or Algeria. Because at this point, Germany can attack with these 5 planes into this sea zone, as well as the naval unit should they survive. And in this sea zone, they can attack with these 5 plus those 2 as well. So they can really bring a lot of firepower to bear on these coastal areas. So this fleet, because of Germany's positioning, really should just remain inactive. What I do recommend, though, is that the British do attack with their Air Force against that fleet, which is trying to escape the Baltic and the Atlantic and get into the Mediterranean, where it can converge with the battleship and transport and become a fairly potent force. So the only combat that I've got lined up here is this and the destroyer and the sub. A lot of the other stuff, there may be some situational opportunities. Unfortunately, if Germany's able to cut off Egypt, this fleet cannot come through the Suez Canal and attack the battleship and the transport. A lot of things change, but assuming that Germany is able to do this and they do succeed with that type of force, then those are the only combat moves that I can recommend. In this situation, over here with the sub, it's likely that perhaps neither sub will hit each other. Each sub is going to get to roll a 2 or less, and there's no sneak attack, so they'll both get to roll. The Japanese sub can then choose to submerge, and then the UK sub will just be stuck there, and then the Japs will still be able to use their sub. So we'll just say, for purposes of this example, that neither sub hits and they both survive. Here with the destroyer and the transport, the destroyer will likely kill the transport, and the transport will likely miss, and the destroyer will survive. Over here in this battle, one reason that I don't add a transport or a battleship into this mix is any fleet that remains there for the UK is going to get pounded by the German Air Force on Germany's turn, and so you always must remain cognizant of what your enemy can counterattack you with. But secondly, bringing in any naval units allows those submarines to actively participate. As it stands, you will likely end up by destroying all of the naval units that Germany has, and you should definitely lose one, perhaps two, but we'll just say that you lose one air unit in that attack, and then these planes can both land back in the UK. With those combat moves finished, you should proceed to non-combat movement. This transport can pick up this tank and drop it off in the UK for potential future invasion. This infantry can move to here. This infantry can move to here to get away from the battleship bombard from the German battleship. This plane can fly to here to help defend, and I'd recommend moving both of these units to there, and that puts them fairly out of range of the Japanese. And this transport here off Australia can move over 1-2. It is within range, but the Japanese of course have to allocate some units to go after it if they should choose to, and they only have so many units they can allocate to so many battles, so it's not that much of a risk having it there. So that concludes the UK's move. Other than placing these factories, place your first factory in India and your second factory there in South Africa. Now one comment about the South African factory, I think it's critical to understanding the importance of it, is that it's so much more difficult with this new map and the changes to reinforce Africa. As we've seen with a large German Air Force presence, the Germans can pretty much deny the UK from traveling south down the sea passages into Africa. And so if you asked yourself the question, would I be interested in buying 2 super transports that would cost 16 IPCs for 2 transports, and those transports could essentially travel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces, and they could rotate. And every turn, one transport would go this way and one transport would come back, and it could carry 2 units down to South Africa. Would you be willing to buy a match set of 2 transports in order to do that? Which essentially allows you to keep Africa in the game and continue to be able to contest it with Germany. And I think you would buy those 2 transports, and so the factory, which costs 1 IPC less than 2 transports, and of course can't be attacked on the way, is definitely a good purchase that should be made and keeps Africa in the British court.